Good afternoon and welcome to today's press conference with Minister of Foreign Affairs Tobias Billström and Germany's Minister of Foreign Affairs Annalena Baerbock. The press conference will be available on the Swedish government's website government.se.
So, herzlich willkommen zu dieser Pressekonferenz.
A warm welcome to this press conference, Annalena. Germany is a very important partner for Sweden, and I'm delighted about your visit today, the visit of the Federal Foreign Minister, Annalena Baerbock. The relations between Germany and Sweden are deeply rooted in history, but are also forward-looking. You are among our most important partners within the EU, and I very much appreciate the fact that we are closely working together and that we closely coordinate, especially also during our EU presidency.
Annalena, I'm very pleased to see you here. And today, Foreign Minister Baerbock and I discussed some key issues for the current and future prosperity, progress and peace in Europe. I'd like to touch upon a few of them shortly, but let me start off with the devastating earthquake in Turkey and Syria. The earthquakes just a week ago have had devastating consequences, and we stand in solidarity with Turkey and with the Syrian people. We are now focusing on supporting those affected by this tragedy. And together with partners, European and international, Sweden and Germany have acted swiftly to offer our support. And we stand ready to continue to provide the necessary support to Turkey and to the Syrian people. We coordinate closely with the Turkish authorities and with other international partners such as the UN. The Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson has taken the initiative to organize a donor conference in Brussels in March, hosted by the Swedish EU Presidency and the European Commission. And we will, of course, do this in close coordination with Turkey. The aim is to mobilize international support to the affected areas, and during our discussions today we also emphasized the importance of a true partnership between Sweden and Germany in so many areas. The extensive trade relations between our countries, collaboration on innovation and green technology, and defense cooperation were among the issues we talked about today. I look forward to strengthening even further our cooperation and dialogue. Minister Baerbock and I discussed extensively the situation in Ukraine. Primary priority for the Swedish EU presidency is to continue our steadfast support to Ukraine, responding to the war and supporting Ukraine's independence, sovereignty and territorial integrity is at the center of the Swedish foreign policy as well as our EU presidency. And we are working intensively to further develop our support to Ukraine. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank Germany for the crucial role you have played in providing support to Ukraine. The EU's swift and decisive response to the invasion of Ukraine is proof of how strong we are when we act together. Both our support to Ukraine and the sanctions against Russia are historic in scale. And nonetheless, we need to explore how to further increase collective pressure on Russia. I have conveyed my gratitude to Minister Baerbock for Germany's steadfast support for Swedish accession to NATO, and I look forward to the continued cooperation as allies. Finland and Sweden as NATO members will substantially benefit the security situation in the Baltic Sea region and beyond. And I look forward to staying in close contact with you, Minister Baerbock, dear Annalena, on these and many other issues, not least during our EU presidency. And thank you, and I would now like to hand over to my colleague before we take a few questions. Please, Annalena, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tobias, and good afternoon. And unfortunately, my only Swedish word is skål. Therefore, I speak in German. Ich freue mich sehr, heute erneut hier in...
I'm delighted to be in Stockholm in Sweden again after you have recently visited Berlin and had been our guest. And when we flew to Stockholm coming from Finland, we took this bird's eye perspective, and that really there you can really see what is so special about Sweden, the Baltic Sea, the landscape. And the Baltic Sea is much more than just water. It is an element that very naturally links us as partners. It's our lifeline. And since the 24th of February, we have really seen that this space is also under pressure because your border with Russia is only 300, you only have 300 kilometers between Gotland and Kaliningrad. So it is very important for us that we not only exchange on the normal European councils in Brussels, but that and within NATO, but that we also show in bilateral terms that we are closer than ever. The people in Sweden have shown that since the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, that the majority of them wants to accede to NATO. And it is against this backdrop not only understandable, it is self-evident. And you have our full support in this. Since you have opted for joining NATO, and this is quite remarkable, after 200 years of non-alignment, let's not forget about that. You have taken comprehensive measures in order to implement the trilateral memorandum of Madrid. It was the right thing to do, and it was important that with regard to the concerns voiced by Turkey, you reached out to Turkey and undertook substantial steps, tangible steps, to address these concerns. Now it is time to swiftly implement what has been agreed in Madrid by all NATO member states so that you can become a member of the alliance of NATO hand in hand with Finland. From day one, you have fulfilled all criteria for NATO accession. Even before your appliance for membership, you have been a close partner for NATO. And let me say this very clear once again, that this occasion, Sweden and Finland fulfill the conditions that we have agreed upon in Madrid together. So it is very important for NATO as a whole that Finland and Sweden can join before the next NATO summit. Because as NATO, we are not only winning 2 strong new members with you, countries with which we have already had close cooperation before. We are also bringing a bit more security for all of us into the alliance, and we will be stronger together. Your security is also our security. And not only within NATO, but also within the EU, as you have already mentioned, we found ourselves in a decisive phase with great impacts for the future. Putin's invasion showed that wars in Europe are indeed not unthinkable, and that we also need to rethink our economic relations and reposition ourselves. The expansion of renewable energy sources therefore becomes a double security strategy. We are strengthening Europe's sovereignty by expanding offshore wind energy in the Baltic Sea area, and at the same time we are making Europe independent of imports from Russia. With this important step for our security, we are also addressing another security threat in our century, and that is expanding wind energy, especially in the Baltic Sea. We are also fighting the climate crisis. My goal is that we will also increasingly tap the Baltic Sea as a blue power plant in our midst and use it for the green transition of Europe. As the federal government, we would like to use our presidency of the Council of Baltic Sea States. In June in Wismar, I will be inviting you and the other foreign ministers of the Council of Baltic Sea States. Wismar is also a symbol of the history that Germany and Sweden share as littoral states of the Baltic Sea. After the 30 Years' War with so much bloodshed, the city fell to the Swedish crown in 1648. In 1803, Swedish reign over Wismar ended, and to this day, the city hosts a Swedish celebration every year. The fact that we can meet as friends and partners with other littoral states of the Baltic Sea in Wismar 200 years later in order to discuss common interests and goals and to work on them together is something that I see as a very lucky situation, a very lucky event, something that had been just normal in the past, but the Russian war of aggression shows that it cannot be taken for granted. This is a mandate to all of us to do everything we can so that everywhere in Europe people can live in peace, freedom and security. Tobias, in that spirit, Once again, thank you very much, not only for the excellent discussion that we had, but also thank you very much for the friendship between our countries. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing you again soon in Berlin, Stockholm, or Brussels, or on the other side of the Baltic Sea in Wismar. Thank you very much for the exchange today. Thank you very much, Annalena.
And now we'll take a few short questions, please.
Thank you. So the first question goes to German newspaper, please.
Guten Tag. Matthias Wiesuer, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. Eine Frage an beide aus.
I have a question to both foreign ministers. Jens Stoltenberg, the NATO Secretary General, said no longer insisted for the first time that Sweden and Finland should join NATO together at the same time. He said this was not the most crucial issue, but it was important that both become members as soon as possible. How does Sweden deal with this remark? And Minister Baerbock, what do you say about this remark by Mr. Stoltenberg?
Thank you very much for the question, and I would like to say the following. It has always been clear that Sweden and Finland, of course, put forward our applications in one at one point in time. But it has always been very clear that this is a natural process where two parliaments and two states, Finland and Sweden, are also having their own internal processes to take into consideration. And finally, we also have to realize that the Turkish parliament also has a say in this. And that leads us to the conclusion that after all, the ratification process is a question of a Turkish decision which neither Sweden nor Finland can influence. And this is my short and clear answer. We still aim, of course, to become NATO members as soon as possible, and we work along fulfilling the trilateral memorandum that was signed in Madrid, but we fully respect that the ratification, if it comes, is a Turkish decision, and requests that goes beyond the memorandum is something that the Swedish government cannot deliver. Thank you.
Ich kann mich an dieser Stelle nur wiederholen.
I can only repeat what I said before. At the NATO summit in Madrid, we decided clear criteria for Sweden and Finland to join. Sweden and Finland have taken substantial steps to implement the trilateral memorandum of Madrid, and against this backdrop and the fact that we have decided this together as NATO member states and that there are clear conditions for accession to NATO, our expectation is that all member states of NATO, including Hungary and Turkey, will now implement the accession of Sweden and Finland and will no longer delay the process.
The second question goes to Swedish news agency, TT.
Thank you. Niklas Svan from Swedish News Agency, TT. I would like to ask Annalena Baerbock, what can Germany do to make Turkey ratify the Swedish NATO application? Could you, in any sense, pressure Turkey, or what could you do? And to Mr. Billström, do you think it will be easier for Sweden to get the ratification from Turkey after the Turkish election in May?
What other partners have done as well, been intensive discussions also with our Turkish partners and friend, that the ratification of the membership of Finland and Sweden is not only for Finland and Sweden, but it's in our own security interest of NATO member states. So it's also in the own interest of Turkey and all the other NATO member states.
As I said before in my answer to the gentleman from Frankfurt Allgemeine, Sweden is committed to implementing the trilateral memorandum, and Sweden has delivered concrete results on all the parts of the memorandum, and we continue to do so, and we see no reason for Turkey not to ratify our application, but believe that the ratification process actually could start. Thank you.
Next question to Reuters.
Yeah. Thank you. Alexander Ratz von Reuters. Minister Billström, could you tell us the latest on the investigation on the Nord Stream attacks? And are you at this point investigating in only one direction? Und Ministerin Baerbock, an Sie die gleiche Frage. Was ist Ihr Stand?
And Minister Baerbock, the same question to you. What is your state of knowledge about the investigations? And do you think it is excluded that somebody outside Russia could be responsible for these attacks?
For the question, and I would like to reiterate what I have said before. that the investigation process is a matter for the prosecutor's agency here in Sweden. They are conducting an independent investigation upon which the government in Sweden has no influence upon. When they are finished with their investigation, they will deliver a report on this. So I have nothing to add to what has already been said many times before by the Swedish government. Thank you.
Da wir uns kontinuierlich auch über diese Frage
As we are continuously exchanging also on this matter, I can only highlight what my Swedish colleague just said. The explosions at the pipeline were a severe act of sabotage, but the strength of the rule of law is that there will first be investigations and then results will be announced. We have investigations ongoing in different countries, including Sweden and Denmark. And once the results will be there, they will be presented. And as you know, in Germany, there is the federal public prosecutor who is responsible for the investigations, and he is closely working together with the other investigative authorities in the other countries, and in the end, they will share their insights and their findings.
Next question from Swedish Radio.
Mats Eriksson, Swedish Radio. Starting off with the statement of Stoltenberg earlier today, what would be your view of the security situation if Finland and Sweden are not ratified simultaneously? How would you view such a situation, and what can you do to avoid that?
Gerade weil ich es eben nicht nur für Finnland
Just because I don't think it is only essential for Sweden and Finland to join NATO as quickly as possible, but as I said, it is also in our very own security interest for them to join. I think it is wrong to engage in speculation here. I will do everything I can to make sure that Sweden and Finland can join NATO as soon as possible, because it is in our common security interest as NATO.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.